First things first. Good morning. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is the Hall of Famer, Cris. This is a very dapper Nick Wright. What?
Oh, my lapel pin.
I haven't seen that. Usually it's the flower.
It's brand new. It's the Trinidad flag. This was given to us by friends in Trinidad that are amazingly, maybe because it's an hour later there, I'm not quite sure the reason, huge First Things First fans.
What about they like you?
Well, yeah, but I didn't know the folks in Trinidad were caring so much about American sports. Those took a trip there. Some of the police officers in Trinidad pulled over their car to say, "Where's Cris Carter?" I said, "He is not with me in Trinidad," but that's about Jenna Wolfe, so I wanted to represent them and their culture, and so wearing the flag this morning.
Two things that was overlooked. One, you said they probably watch because the show starts an hour later, so if the bosses are watching, if that's something you want us to do, we are happy to wrap our heads around starting an hour later. And number two, we're also big in Jamaica. On the island of Jamaica, they are big fans of First Things First.
Good to know that
Tomorrow,
as well.
I'll be draped in the Jamaican flag, where I was born, by the way, so it'll be a theme. You're next,
Welcome
Cece.
to the show.
Pick a country.
Thank you so much. Cece's big in the States.
In the States.
That's where he's big.
All of them.
That's pretty important.
All the states. Fact, the best record in the East belongs to the Toronto Raptors. Fact, the best player in the East is Cleveland's LeBron James. So Raptors versus Cleveland last night, you know, best record versus best player, and best player won. LeBron James, after allowing a season-high 79 points in the first half and trailing by 15 to the Raptors, LeBron and the Cavs took over, beating the top seed in the East, 132-129. This was a close one. LeBron, 35 points, 17 assists, 0 turnovers. Here's LeBron on if he sent a message.
No. It's a good win for us just because how depleted we are with our roster and everything that's been going on. It's a good win for us versus a very good opponent. But I don't need to remind anybody what my teams are capable of doing. So that wasn't a factor.
All right, Cece, let's talk. It was a great game. This is a great game because it became a great game at the end. How meaningful was last night's game for both of these teams?
Before the game tipped off, I was getting ready to send out a tweet. This is a must-win for Toronto because I really thought it was important. Toronto was coming into Cleveland in a tough stretch, playing 3 games in 4 days. They played Sunday, lost a tough matchup, had gone to Orlando, had played the night before, so they were on a back-to-back. DeRozan didn't play in Orlando, though, so he was only playing Sunday's game and then this game. So coming into Cleveland with all the injuries, Cal Korver getting the awful news that his brother had passed away, he wasn't going to be with the team, so prayers with Cal and his family.
Of course.
Great guy. And also the team realizing, wow, something else happened. So Cleveland, during the day, they go to shoot around. They get the news that Cal's not going to be there. So they go through mourning with one of their teammates who's not going to be there after everything else that they've been through. The coach not being there, the other inconsistencies in the lineup. And then Toronto gets out to the big whopping lead. So I thought they had to win this game. It was going to follow up, wow, this is what Toronto had to do. But Cleveland's comeback, I believe, was in a must-win situation for Toronto because you could even see with the additions that Toronto has, their bench, it is stronger. Man, they are a better team, but they still don't have an answer for LeBron. Like, they don't have anyone to guard LeBron. Like, they're trying to switch up. Sherbak, he can't guard LeBron. And
Pascal Siakam was trying to check.
He gave LeBron the most problems.
Right.
You know, so I thought that was a little bit promising. But at the end of the day, I mean, LeBron has their number. Coming into this game, they were 1-7 in the last 8 games in Cleveland, the last 3 years. Now, if you can't win in Cleveland, I don't care if you have home court advantage because, to me, this is more mental than it is about what the numbers
Wait, so
are.
why do you think they're the better team?
Which team?
Toronto. You said Toronto's the better team, but they can't.
No, they're a better all-around. Like, they really are. But LeBron is their kryptonite.
Yeah.
They don't have an answer for LeBron. All around, you would take their roster. Besides LeBron, the coaching situation, Casey's done a great job there. I mean, but the numbers are just overwhelming as far as LeBron's dominance of Toronto. And I thought it was really important, too. LeBron's got a lot of new guys with him. They haven't seen LeBron do this to Toronto.
Right.
So for them, it was more like make-believe.
Cece, you went into it thinking it might be a must-win for Toronto. I went into it thinking Toronto should maybe play nobody. They got the 1 seed locked up. They have nothing to gain in this game, in my eyes. They weren't going, even if they won that game, they weren't going to get a mental edge on LeBron. Maybe on some of the fringe players with Cleveland, but because Cleveland had the built-in excuses.
If they could have followed up the second half with something similar to the first half, that would have really helped.
If they'd have blown them out, sure, absolutely.
I mean, the way their bench played, because their bench players would be able to gain more confidence because they haven't been there the last 3 years.
I didn't see a blowout coming. Now, the first half, the Cavs, I sent out a tweet. I was like, I'm really impressed by the Cavs' inspired effort on defense. I mean, it was egregious defense, by the way, by both teams, essentially, in the first half. But
teams.
Toronto was extraordinary in the first half. I didn't see a blowout coming. And I thought maybe Toronto would say, you know what, Cleveland, we're not showing you nothing till the Eastern Conference Finals. We're going to take this game off. They obviously didn't. They had their full complement of players, except for C.J. Miles, who was out. And this was the worst possible result for the Raptors. This was worse than being blown out because you had them, and then what happened? LeBron executed that zero dark 30 he talks about come the playoffs, and there was no answer. Jenna, you have asked me all year long, are you worried about the Cavs? Why are you not worried about the Cavs? That is why I've never been worried about the Cavs and this conference. Because when you have that guy, and he can do that, activate that level of play. Now, the 17 assists, 0 turnovers, even by LeBron standards, is somewhat unprecedented to go along with 35 points. But at least 90% of that is what we will expect to see from him night in, night out in the postseason. The Raptors do not have an answer. And when the game ended last night, this is what I was thinking about. When the Cavs are up 3-1 in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they've won Game 4 in Cleveland, this is the game that people will remember. This is the game where Cleveland reminded everyone that if you don't have either a way to just send waves at LeBron or an overwhelming level of talent the way the Warriors do, in a playoff series, when he played 39 minutes last night. In the playoffs, he's going to play 43. So there's going to be fewer minutes where it's just Cleveland's bench against your bench. You don't have an answer for that.
After the game last night, Larry Drew, who's in for Ty Lue, who's off on medical leave, said there's always one game that you can look to over the course of the season that's a turning point game for your team. It could be early on, it could be late, it could be somewhere in the middle. But it is a significant turning point. And he said for us, with 5 players out, with our head coach who's out sick, for LeBron to come in up against this Toronto Raptors team, this was a turning point game. Do you believe that?
It was a big game for him. It was a big game. It also could be the game, too, that George Hill got back on track. Because regardless of LeBron played a once-in-a-lifetime game. We haven't seen that game. Is that true? I mean, right?
No player in NBA history has ever had more than 30 points, more than 15 assists, and 0 turnovers. It's never happened before.
Never happened. But if George Hill don't show up, like if they don't have a number 3. So for me, yeah, monumental. Yes, it was great that they got the defense and put some effort into it. But if they don't have a number 3, and I believe that to be George Hill, if they don't get that constant contribution from a number 3, I know what Love's going to give me. 18 to 24, about 8 to 12 rebounds. That's what he's going to give me. He's going to be there for LeBron. He's going to be able to knock down shots. We saw him knock down the corner shot at the end of the game there, the big 3. If Kyle Korver hits that in the finals last year,
in Game 3.
So we know we have that in Kevin Love. But if they don't have a number 3, to me, it's still, I don't care how good LeBron plays. Like, they needed that type of effort to be able to win that type of game. But they also needed that 22 from George Hill in those crucial spots.
And Sarah Kustok, who's going to join us later, she mentioned about how she thought last week when Kevin Love comes back and the spacing is that much better, that will help George Hill. That will help the backcourt, just having Love out there as a spacer.
How does it help George Hill?
Because you all of a sudden have another shooter out there that you have to be concerned with. Because LeBron is always a threat to drive, you're going to have to sag off some other players. You don't want to sag off Love because he's such a good shooter. So all of a sudden, George Hill has some more open shots. But JR had more open shots. Jose Calderon, who, by the way, I thought was going to be the 14th man on this team and consistently has been a good player.
Yeah, apologize to him.
Listen, Jose, I thought
him.
you were done. I thought you were a veteran leader. I didn't think you would be the best point guard on this team through 74 games. But there's one thing you mentioned, the pass to Love on what was essentially the game-clinching basket. They were up.
LeBron could have shot it.
LeBron could have shot it. And that play is the play that since day one of LeBron's career, he's been criticized for. LeBron's entire career, we've said, man, Kobe would have taken that shot. Mike would have taken that shot. And LeBron has refused to give in to the noise, to give in to the narrative that there is some type of sports machismo that goes along with I'm taking the last shot, as opposed to I am generating for my team the best shot.
You want him to take the shot. Well, you think he's going to take the shot.
We've been taught that that is what you're supposed to do. And by the way, Game 3 of the finals last year, he did it. And maybe if he takes a bad shot, he makes it. And maybe they win that game.
Yeah.
But LeBron is robotic in his dedication to we are making the right play. And last night was an example as to why, over the course of time, that is why, as much as any reason, that is why I believe he's the greatest player ever. Because he will make the right play no matter what the media, no matter what former players, no matter what other people say you're supposed to do in that spot.
Team first.
He got the best shot for his team. That was a huge win last night.
35 points, 17 assists, 0 turnovers. These two teams will match up again on April 3rd in Cleveland.
Took Nick 11 minutes to say he was the greatest
player of all time. Okay. I had 10, so I'm out. Dang it. All right, we'll try again tomorrow. Hey, coming up.
I told you he was going to get it in there.
I mean, straight facts.
Don't say it again.
Straight
facts. Is Sam Darnold now a lock to go #1? We've got the answer next on First Things First. Full disclosure, when I post my workout videos, I rarely shoot them in the rain. Can't run as fast, not as accurate with my burpees. Sam Darnold does not feel the same way. The projected first pick in this year's draft did take part in USC's pro day in the rain and was very accurate. The USC standout quarterback wowed a crowd of coaches, GMs, draft experts. Our Joel Klatt was there, and here's what he took away.
He had one of the most, I would say, best pro days I've seen in a long time. Coming away from today, and this is the earliest I've said this in this process, the New York Giants are on the clock because I think the #1 pick was totally solidified today.
Ooh. CeCe, how hard will it be for Sam Darnold to now live up to the hype? There's a lot of hype surrounding him now.
Well, any of the players that's drafted first, regardless if it's a quarterback, regardless if it's a defensive end, if you are in that position in the league, they're saying you're the best prospect for pro football. So you're always under. You get the biggest contract and, yes, typically the biggest expectations. Sam Darnold, I believe, is the best he's the safest of all the quarterbacks. I believe with his work, I believe him throwing the ball, his ability to be able to be accurate with the football, to be able to make the right decisions with the football. I believe he is a superstar in the NFL. But living up to the hype, I believe a lot of that has to do with the Cleveland Browns. You know, what else are they going to do? Now, they've helped him out. He's done his part. Josh Gordon is there, all right? Jarvis Landry has been traded for. Do they end up getting Barkley with #4? Because for me, if they do that, he's going to be able to live up to the hype. I know how important it is to get supported as a quarterback, let alone the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. They are looking for someone to take the steering wheel and turn the history of this franchise around. I believe Sam Darnold is that guy, but it is still, that first pick is important, but that fourth pick is just as important because you got to put some weapons around the kid so that he can flourish in the NFL, because I believe Sam Darnold is going to flourish. But every year we go through all these prospects, and we act like these guys can't miss. Like 3 or 4 of these guys will be top 10 quarterbacks in 3 or 4 years. I believe Sam will be a star, but I believe there's a star in every crop of quarterbacks, and also there is a bust. If you look at the last couple of years that we've seen, look at last year's draft. Who did we have? Deshaun Watson. All right? Now, I believe the jury's still out on Trubisky. I believe he's going to be a quality starter. But also look at the Browns had. Who they drafted? They drafted Deshaun Kaiser. He threw 20 interceptions as a rookie. Now, people were saying great things about him a year ago. So let's just be careful in analyzing these quarterbacks to realize that it's hard being a quarterback in the league. It's hard living up to the expectations. I do believe Sam will live up to the expectations of being the #1 pick, but there will be at least 1 or 2 busts of those 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are ranked the top ones, John.
And even let's disregard the bust for a moment and talk about the quarterbacks that work out. You said something really interesting to me the other day when we were talking about these quarterbacks. And you said, let's not just anoint one of these guys that he's going to be a top 5 quarterback in this league.
Yes.
And so once you said that, I started thinking about it and looking at it. So I expanded it to like the 7 best quarterbacks in football right now. In no particular order. This is not Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Big Ben, Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, and I think for a long time, maybe not anymore, for a long time, Phillip Rivers is in that category.
Right. Only half of those guys were first-day starters.
Well, and, Cece, more than half of those guys have been in the league a dozen years. Like, so it's not, when we say get in the top 5, you got to keep in mind, Brady's been in there for 12 years.
Yes.
Breeze has been in there for 10 years. Rodgers been in there for close to 10. Big Ben's been in there for close to 10. Carson Wentz is the only new guy. Russell Wilson's going into year 7.
And what's the point? That it's going to take a long time for us, the jury's out?
My point is that club that people are like, okay, if you hit on Darnold, if you get it right with Darnold, you're getting a top 5 quarterback. Maybe not.
No, you need to adjust that.
Right. Like, I mean, I feel like the Panthers hit on Cam. He's only been a top 5 quarterback 1 year of his career. I think the Falcons hit on Matt Ryan. He's only been a top 5 quarterback 1 year of his career.
Yes.
Like the idea that you can pick the right guy. You can be right that Darnold's the safest, or I can be right that Rosen has the most upside. And you still don't have a top 5 quarterback when they reach their full maximum potential. And that's the key and that's why your point on the system and the players around you matter so much. And I'm actually bullish on potentially, if Cleveland gets the quarterback right, what their future could be. Because I think while Jarvis Landry, I wouldn't pay him $16 million a year. Like, I think
you got to stop counting people's money, man.
Okay,
okay, because I'm gonna tell you what people are gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
How long Nick Wright been on TV? How much that dude make? Nick, it is not our job to hate people on their money.
Hold on. Let me make this clear, because I'm not hating him on his money. The comparison to what I make in this television show is a little different because we don't have a hard cap system. Like, the only reason I bring it up is because I think it's hard to evaluate whether or not a player is going to give you the production of the percentage of the cap. I don't begrudge anyone making their money. I hope everyone makes a ton of money. But so disregard the money thing. We can discuss that further. Yeah, my point is, I'm
going to remove that from your critique.
The on-the-field addition of Jarvis Landry, I think, is good. Josh Gordon, if he can continue staying on the right path. Sashi Brown got the Browns a boatload of future draft picks. I think Myles Garrett's a true blue chipper. So they could be in a good position. But that doesn't mean Darnold is going to be Carson Wentz and break into that club. Like, the story on Wentz this year is, wow, we have a new star quarterback in this league. Jameis has...
Look at the personnel around Carson Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's not forget that. One of the best offensive lines, one of the best defensive lines. Actually, they went to the Super Bowl without Carson Wentz, so it lets you know as far as the supporting cast. The supporting cast becomes very important in their overall development and their arc in the league of how high they can go.
So is the bottom line, it's more about the team drafting the player than the player themselves? Like, the team is going to make the player successful more than the player will make the team successful?
Ultimately, it's about talent. Like, he's going to have to be a great talent, which I believe Sam to be. The reason why I believe Sam is the safest, also I believe he'll be the best long-term, is because he's still one of the best athletes, all right? Jared Goff, right now, he throws the ball good, but he'll never be the athlete that Sam Darnold will be. And I just believe that Sam will get supported better there in Cleveland, because I believe they're going to turn the franchise around.
All right, you might be the only one. Hey, coming out, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Confused when it comes to the catch rule? We might have an expert here. That's next on First Things First. All right, Dwight Howard turned back the clock last night. 32 points, 30 rebounds in a win over the Nets. The first 30-30 game in the NBA in 8 years, and only the second since 1982. Nick, how shocking was Dwight's dominant performance last night?
Listen, a 30-30 game, you mentioned it, we've only seen 2 since Moses Malone. Kevin Love did it 8 years ago as a Timberwolf. Dwight last night. Now, one note before we get to Dwight, just a reminder of what Wilt Chamberlain was as a basketball player. There have been 156 30-30 games in NBA history. Wilt is in first place with 124 of them.
Amazing.
Walt Bellamy is in second with 4 of them. So the whole NBA history combined has 32 compared to Wilt's 124. I'm glad Dwight did this because it's a good opportunity to remind people of the player Dwight Howard has been, which is a no doubt first ballot Hall of Famer, a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, an 8-time All-NBA player, a 4-time top 5 MVP guy who for some reason was compared, the expectation was, oh, he should go be Shaq. Shaq's 4 inches taller than Dwight Howard. Like, there are very few similarities between Shaq and Dwight. And if people want to say Dwight didn't quite live up to what his full potential was, I mean, sure, I suppose, but living up to whatever he lived up to, it got him to be the best center in this league for nearly a decade and one of the most dominant defensive players we've seen in the last 15 years. So I'm glad he's having a nice season in Charlotte. Nobody could have seen a 30-30 game coming, but I'm happy for Dwight.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that thought Dwight Howard should have been a lot better as a pro. He doesn't have one offensive move he can go to as a player. Like, he's known as a defensive player, also a rebounder. That's what he is. Did he reach his potential? Because as an athlete, when you see people, you wonder, man, can they get all the potential out of that body? And Dwight Howard, he might be a Hall of Famer. I don't have no vote on that. Don't even care. But he will not be a person that reaches with his skill level, with the body he had, as athletic as he was. Like, he should have been a better NBA player. And in that 10 years that you're saying he was the best center, it's also one of the worst 10 years in NBA history as far as lack of dominant big men.
All right. Hey, after plenty of controversy and discussion on
he's
what
made a lot of money.
And what isn't, and what should, and what shouldn't be a catch, it seems we finally have some clarity heading into next NFL season. After Troy Vincent confirmed there would be changes, Al Riveron, the VP of officiating, detailed exactly what those changes likely will be. All right, here we go, guys. The competition committee recommended that a reception will constitute 1, control, 2, 2 feet or another body part, or 3, a football move. So break this down a little bit for us, CC. Take us through what this means moving forward now.
What it means actually is that now you're going to have to start looking for different things. So now say, for instance, if a receiver is potentially falling to the ground, he's going across the middle, they throw him the football. He has the ball in his hand. He has possession of the ball. He takes 1 or 2 steps. Now he's getting ready to go to the ground. The referees and fans are going to have to determine, did he take a 3rd step before he hit the ground? Because you don't have to survive the ground now, but now do you have something that is common to the game or another step? So those are things that we're going to have to watch. They did a very good job, Al and the rest of the committee, as far as getting the verbiage very, very simple, because that was one of the complications in trying to adjust this rule. How do we adjust the language? Do we put a 3rd step in there? So through a process of elimination, what was the easiest way to be able to describe it as a move, a 3rd step, something that's common to the game? Those things I'm in favor for, because I think that fans, we have to give them time to adjust to this. But I believe that they got it right in trying to simplify and allowing the players not to have to survive the ground.
And I hope fans quickly adjust this, because the league is doing this for the fans. You were in those meetings. This is much more popular, this rule change, amongst fans. It is much less hotly debated amongst fans whether or not they should change the rule. Fans are nearly unanimous. Yeah, of course, change the catch rule. Then amongst the players and the people in that room. You guys had as you described, a very, I don't want to say contentious, but a contested discussion about how you should do this.
Bill Cowher has no back down in him. Much respect, Bill.
Yeah, so Bill and CC were on different sides of this equation. But listen, you are one of the world's foremost experts on this, not just because of your career catching the football, but because you've been in these meetings. And you and I have talked off the air about potential side effects of this. So I want to ask you a few questions. One is that I know you were concerned about. Are we going to have a lot more fumbles?
Yes.
Because I want to explain to the audience, and then you can expand on it. If I'm running across the middle and I catch the ball and I'm going to the ground, and I get my 2 steps, and maybe even I get a knee, but no one touches me.
No one touches.
And then I hit the ground.
That's going to be the common call.
No one touches me, and I hit the ground, and that ball pops loose.
Let's not forget what we've learned all our life. The ground can't cause a fumble.
Right. But in this instance, so I'm running across the middle. No one touches me. Couple steps. I know you hate when I mimic football, but I'm going to do my best here. Yeah. No one touches me.
Jenna hit you.
I fall to the ground, and when I hit the ground, the ball pops loose. That's been an incompletion. Now, that's a fumble?
It's a catch and a fumble. So, yes, a live ball.
Okay.
And one of the reasons you were not necessarily in favor of this was not just because of more fumbles, but because of what you saw on film about what happens during a fumble scrum?
Right. People don't realize, like, all the inadvertent whistles and all the sometimes stoppage in play. Sometimes players are still playing. Defensive players have been taught, they practice this all the time. Anytime the ball hits the ground, pick the ball up and run it the other way. Make the referee make the decision. So we're going to have some confusion on some of these plays, especially early, because the defenders will continue playing through the play. When we decide to change the catch rule, you have to understand and you have to have a greater appetite for fumbles being involved. Now, what I'm worried about is players getting hit. Will some players stop playing because they thought they heard a whistle? And other players that continue to play and someone gets hurt because they don't know, because now we're in a time that they're not used to.
Just real quick, I want to explain one other thing to the audience. We have spent a ton of time talking about the Jesse James play. The Jesse James play, you don't have to worry about the fumble because he crosses the goal line. So then the world stops. Like, it has control. He takes the 2 steps, knee hits, cross the goal line. That's not a fumble. But if that happens at the 5-yard line, and if instead of repossessing it when the ball comes loose, it squirts loose, that can be New England ball if they pick it up. I know that was one of your concerns. Go ahead, Jenna. Another one of your concerns was we have done a lot of things to make the game easier for offenses, right? And that is that, do you think this is a further step in that direction?
Of course it is. It's easier to catch the ball. And now with the technology, with the gloves, like, this is not someone who played in the 80s, 90s, and 2000 hating on where the game is. This is just obvious. Like, the gloves make it easier to catch the ball. We have thrived throwing the ball. I did a chart with my man Dusty and presented it to them. It blew their mind. They couldn't believe how successful we were throwing the football.
And more successful now than ever.
More than ever. So I'm saying, wow, you're getting ready to change something that NFL players, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, they don't have no problem catching the ball. So to me, I understand the clarity in the bad plays, but also it's a rule that guys have thrived playing under those rules.
Does this make the game better? I think for the casual fan, it all gets a little complicated with all the minutia and the details of what is and isn't a catch. So the bottom line is this what the NFL wanted, just to make the game better, easier to watch, more fun to watch?
They want to simplify it for the fan, so they can enjoy. And so on Monday, we don't have those 3 to 5. Yes.
And is this going to do it?
No. No, it's not going to do it, because they're going to find some other way to complain about other things. Like, this will help simplify it, but just watch the complications. Just wait till the season starts.
The side effects.
Yes.
Right.
I think the Monday conversation was a huge part of it, that they didn't like the fact that there would be these great games on Sunday, and on Monday we'd be calling Mike Pereira and say, is this or is this not a catch? But Cece's point on fans might find a new thing to nitpick, that's probably a safe bet.
That's what we do. Coming up, also, Mike Pereira had the busiest Mondays this entire offseason. Season. Coming up, is James Harden the greatest offensive player in the history of basketball? Don't say it, Nick. Someone thinks so. It's next on First Things First. Welcome back to First Things First. NBA analyst Sarah Kustok is here. CC's new favorite NBA analyst because of the introduction.
I'm
she's
hanging
bringing
on
the
to it
heat.
as long as I can.
No. We're hanging on to you. You bring great NBA content. You're a regular on the show.
Thanks
a friend of the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Cross town. Holla. Yes.
All of it, Sarah. All of that.
I can't talk to him about basketball all day.
Oh, my gosh. All the hate this morning, talking about my salary caps.
Trinidad, my brothers.
Talking about my pin.
Nick's wearing a pin because apparently First Things First.
We're big in Trinidad. You smart.
It's smart, man. James Harden is likely going to win the MVP award. That much most of the NBA world can agree on. But his game aesthetically pleasing, some say not so much. Hey, looks aren't everything. I learned that back in high school. Don't tell that, thank you, to his head coach, Mike D'Antoni. D'Antoni, who many believe to be an innovational offensive mind, had this to say about the Rocket star.
Yeah, that's the best offensive player I've ever seen. It's just, he does things. They were running guys to him. He just steps a little further back and makes a three. And just, the way he can pass and see the floor, get fouls, layups, floaters, maybe a lob, maybe out to the corner. I mean, just he has so many weapons, and now he's shooting those step back threes. It's impossible to guard. You know, it's impossible.
Some big words there out of Mike D'Antoni. Sarah, how far off is he in his assessment of James Harden?
I hesitate going into James Harden's game because of the year he's having, because of how much I believe everything short of the best offensive player I've seen is accurate. He can score in so many different ways. The way in which we've seen him facilitate has been tremendous. But D'Antoni's saying the best offensive player he played with Kareem. He coached Kobe. I'm from Chicago, so Michael Jordan is it for me. You go through the list of players, Oscar Robertson, I could keep naming different players, and James Harden has been tremendous. But I also think you have to look at D'Antoni's style, how much that lends itself to why James Harden is able to put up the numbers he has, utilizing the type of talents he has. The game has changed. This is a different era. James Harden, for the last 6 years, has averaged about 10 free throw attempts per game, gets 8 or 9 points per game from the free throw line. A big part of that is the way in which they have changed how you can play defense. So I think there's a lot that goes into what we're seeing out of James Harden and what we've seen out of him the past couple seasons, but not over the duration of a career to call him the best offensive player that we've seen.
Listen, I think Harden should be the league's second ever unanimous MVP this year. I have been preaching this gospel for quite some time. I was in Houston when they traded for him. And I remember, because I'm such a stats nerd, looking at his per 36 numbers coming off the bench in OKC and believing Houston got a superstar. And in the last 4 years, he's led the NBA in points created. Just, points scored plus assists, points. There are so many things you can say that sound hyperbolic about James Harden that are, to me, very defensible. You want to argue he is the smartest offensive player ever, with the way he almost games the system with foul calls, with the way he absolutely understands the value of a 3 versus a 2. You can have that argument. Now, it might be an argument, you have that argument. If you want to do what Daryl Morey said to me at the Sloan Analytics Conference a few weeks ago, that James Harden is the best isolation player ever. We can break it down. We can have that discussion as well. If you want to talk about where he's going to finish ranks among shooting guards all time, Jordan 1, and then there's Kobe, there's Wade, there's Jerry West. Is James Harden already in the top 5? I'll have that discussion. So I'm not here to knock James Harden, but to call him the best offensive player ever when he's not the best offensive player. Cece, you put it. Is there a franchise Harden's played for that he's the best offensive player in the history of that franchise? Not that I know of, because the first thing that I thought of was, hey, when he was in OKC. Man, Kevin Durant's a better offensive player, in my mind. I just get caught up on, I listen to what people say. If you do an interview, someone puts a microphone, television there, I just listen to what people say. Ever? Man, you know how long ever is? I think people forget, because even to say that James Harden is the smartest, ever, we don't even have all the information to determine ever. Is he the smartest ever? Is he the best ever? I'm just talking based on my eyes, what I've seen.
Right.
And if you're going to do this, if you're going to make a comparison to a great of this era, you have to try to transition. So last night, what I was thinking about, what would Michael Jordan be like in that spread offense with today's rules, where you can't hand check a guy? Michael Jordan averaged 37 in the old rules where you could clothesline a guy coming down the lane.
Right.
So stop that right there. Now, imagine Kobe in recent history. Kobe is a better shot maker than James Harden. Now, as far as distributor of the basketball, drawing fouls and everything, people can argue those other things. But Kobe, to me, is a more dynamic offensive player. And I'll take you to current day. Kevin Durant. If you ask me, Kevin Durant is the best offensive player in the NBA. James Harden is special. This run that he's been on the last 4 years, it's been tremendous. And we're not trying to take any shine off of his MVP season. But if your coach opens his mouth and says something like that, we have to respond. And ever, man, people just lose. Ever, that's a long, long time. Well, and when I was asking you about it in this franchise, if we talk about big men, you said you thought Akeem, as far as Rockets history, that Akeem was a better offensive player than Harden, just in the history, pardon me, of his current franchise. Yes. So that's the Durant in OKC, and now in Houston, I believe Olajuwon was a better offensive player.
I was just going to say, and we're seeing very special seasons out of James Harden the past 2 years.
Sure.
It's 2 years. It's 2 years, and take no credit away from what he's been doing, because it has been spectacular to watch. But going back to the greatest ever, that's mind-blowing.
But are we all tainted a little bit just because his game is not as flashy as Kobe's or Jordan's or any of these other guys?
Listen, I think that if Harden continues on this pace, from a purely offensive perspective, you are going to be able to make the argument about him versus Wade, him versus Kobe.
Yes.
Like, as from a purely offensive perspective. Now, defense, Kobe was one of the best defensive guards ever. And I would argue Dwayne Wade is the single best shot blocking guard ever. Like, that specific skill set.
I don't think Harden's going to ever be able to approach Kobe, because what Kobe did in the low box, his ability to duplicate the Olajuwon shake, his ability to post up, and Kobe Bryant can play above the rim. James Harden can't do those two things right there. So for me, it'll be hard for him to ever be able to reach Kobe
I agree
Bean.
with that. And we talk so much about James Harden and his three-point shot, his step back, and the analytics side, what he can do. And it has been deadly, but he's still shooting about 37% from three. He's not shooting 41, 42% from the three-point line.
And there's two names that haven't been mentioned that I think, like, listen, if we're talking about best ever on anything, we have to acknowledge Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
No.
Like, there's a reason he scored more points than anybody.
And I don't care how long he does it, he'll never do it as long as Kareem.
No, nobody will do it as long as Kareem. And Kareem creating the only, I believe, unblockable shot in NBA history in the sky. Like, we sometimes lump big men into one category. I said before the show, I don't think Harden's more of a dominant offensive player than Shaq or Wilt. And Cece brought up those guys it was less about skill and more about brute force, and I understand.
And the lack of other big people that could contend them.
And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, part of Harden, though, I think is his physicality matched with his quickness, and that goes back to what defenses can do with hand checking. And I think part of it is his strength and his ability to be explosive.
How much of his recent success, though, is from Mike D'Antoni's coaching and playing under that system? And would he be this successful playing for someone else?
That's a good question. I think a big part is D'Antoni's system, the green light, putting the ball. I mean, to put the ball in his hands, that was before he became a point guard. We were thinking, is this going to work? And James Harden played the point guard position. He proved he could. Now he has a second ball handler in Chris Paul. But I think that's a major factor.
Yeah, sometimes, too, you give credit to the system. D'Antoni's system has always put up huge numbers. But we also have to look at James Harden, how much he's improved his game. When he left college, what type of player he was. In OKC, coming off the bench, what type of player he was. A coach can't put you in position to dribble the ball the way he does. All the moves that he has created, he has studied the game to understand what he can do within the rules. Like, he's amazing, I mean, in one-on-one situations. So I'm not going to give the coach credit for that, because I see D'Antoni's system every year, and you don't get those types of players because it's up to the player.
Right.
And James has developed his skill.
And Harden should have won an MVP and finished second in an MVP before D'Antoni got there, when Kevin McHale was there.
Yep.
Steph's first MVP, I thought that, I mean, the players awarded it to James. I thought it should have been James's MVP. So again, like, his coach put him in a tough spot for the conversation. Because all of us think he's the league MVP. All of us think the Rockets could win the title in large part because of him. But I mean, is he the greatest offensive player ever? Like, of course not.
Just look up ever. Just look how long that is.
Look how long
Sarah,
ever.
stick around. Coming up, can the Raptors recover from what LeBron James did to them last night? Nope, franchise is going under. That's next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First with Sarah Kustok. Time for Say What? The NBA is reportedly discussing the idea of play-in games for the number 7 and 8 spots in each conference. But Adam Silver, you might want to run that by the league's best player,
and your
LeBron
co-commissioner.
Say what?
That's whack. Why? You got to earn your spot to be in the postseason. No consolation for finishing last or anything. That's corny.
But they could have.
That's corny.
12.
That's whack. To play for what? What are they playing for?
Well, that proposal's off the
There you
table.
go. So much for that.
Listen, I like the idea of a play-in tournament for the final spot of the playoffs. You know that. CC, you're against it as well. There's one I think LeBron got wrong.
You don't know if I'm against it. You never even talked to me about this.
Absolutely, we've talked about this. You don't remember. We talked about this exact idea on the show, a single elimination tournament for the final spot in the playoffs. Absolutely.
What day did we do that?
What? I don't know.
I think it was
40 days ago. But all right, maybe. All right, I don't want to speak for you.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the tournament. I don't know what my partner.
Of course,
CC
anything
thinks.
new, odd, weird, that's him. I mean, why are you playing the 82 games?
Sarah, would you like this?
I kind of feel like now I'm excited to see who gets in. The regular season matters. This final stretch matters. I like LeBron
Tell me
saying
how
it's
thrilling the play-in games are for the NCAA. They're thrilling. I just had to get to those. Like, whoa.
Yeah, but but the tournament is wildly thrilling, and that's what they would be trying to
After, you know when the tournament starts? You don't even have to fill out your bracket when they're playing those play-in games.
Right.
They give you credit for those.
Yeah, that is true.
I will give you that.
Thrilling.
All right, just to recap, LeBron thinks it's whack.
LeBron's wrong. Didn't think I'd say that this morning.
Never thought you'd ever say that sentence. If there was any doubt about best team versus best record, LeBron James erased it all last night. Best record in the East, the Toronto Raptors, but are they the best team? Cavs don't think so after allowing a season-high 79 points in the first half and trailing by 15 to the Raptors. LeBron and the Cavaliers took over. They beat the top seed in the East. LeBron had 35 points. He had 17 assists. He turned the ball over 0 times. So was it a statement game for LeBron? Take a listen.
No. It's a good win for us just because how depleted we are with our roster and everything that's been going on. It's a good win for us versus a very good opponent. But I don't need to remind anybody what my teams are capable of doing. So that wasn't a factor.
That was a great transition from LeBron there. I don't need to remind anyone what my team is capable of. But he was getting it right the first time. Go
Sarah,
ahead, Sarah.
how meaningful was this game for both teams on both sides?
I don't typically take a lot of stock in the regular season, but there was a lot of things that jumped off the page at me about this game. First of all, in Toronto, they've had a schedule in which it's pretty compacted right now. They played 7 of 11, but they had their full roster available for them for the most part. They were playing the players who they are going to rely on throughout the playoffs.
The only player didn't play C.J. Miles. He played the night before in Orlando.
The only one.
Yes, and they held him out of that one.
And he's a big part of the bench.
Yes.
But for the Cavs, they're still missing Tristan Thompson, still without Rodney Hood.
Yeah, it's lopsided as far as what they had available and what Cleveland had missing.
Mm-hmm. And their ability, I mean, the Cavs, with what LeBron can do, he's been playing at otherworldly level, but the question is, can the other guys around him fill in the gaps? Kevin Love and his return and how flawlessly he has been able to fit in, what we expected for him to open up the floor for LeBron, for his teammates, was entirely evident. And to me, Toronto, we've been talking about them being in the top 5 in offense and top 5 in defense. The fact that they couldn't stop this Cavaliers team at all. I mean, you got a Cleveland team that's shooting 60% from the field, over 60% from the 3. Toronto wasn't able to turn them over and create points off of turnovers, which is a lot of what their offense have been predicated on, generating it through the defense. And for Toronto, I think the big thing is going to be that mental hurdle. We talk about the bench. How is this bench and young players going to perform in the playoffs? I'm less concerned about that because I see a lot of confidence in that bench area. Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, how much is that talk, that chatter going to slip into their minds about what they have not been able to do in previous postseasons and if this will be different?
This was, no matter how you slice it, the worst case scenario that didn't involve injury for the Toronto Raptors. You come into a game where Cleveland, it's not just that they're missing 5 guys. 4 of the top 8 playoff rotation are out. Nance, Thompson, Hood, Korver. That's 4 of your top 8. They're out. You're about as healthy as any team in the league right now. You just gave CJ the night off. You have a 15-point lead at the half, in a half where the Cavs look disinterested defensively, can't execute anything. One of the best offensive halves in the history of your young franchise. And you lose? You lose like that? You lose where LeBron is late in the game saying, okay, Pascal Siakam, you're the best answer. The whole reason this team went and paid, not salary-wise, but paid in a trade, overpaid for Serge Ibaka, was because he's supposed to be able to check me. Well, he can't. So Pascal Siakam, you come try. And that guy actually did a halfway decent job on it. I'll give him credit. He bodied him somewhat.
Yes, he did.
But the response there is, okay, you're going to play halfway decent defense. I'll collapse the defense and hit guys for open threes. The Cavs hit 15 threes last night. LeBron hit 1. He assisted on 11 others. So it wasn't just 17 assists. It was 17 assists, 11 of which went for 3. The biggest hurdle the Raptors have with Cleveland, aside from they don't have LeBron, is a mental one. And last night, to me, was worse than losing by 25. Last night it compounded that mental hurdle even further.
Yeah, I got to disagree with you as far as losing by 25, because when you watch the film today, there are things that they're going to be able to take from the game that they'll be pleased with. Like, they're right there in the game. They shoot 3 of 16 in the second half from three-point. They shot 18% from three-point. So if they just shoot a decent percentage, all right?
In the second half?
Yes, they're going to win the game, or at least be in the game and it'll probably be a buzzer beater. But they're going to shoot typically better than that. How the bench players played, I think, is encouraging. Fred VanVleet, like, this dude is a player. He is a main rotation. Like, y'all can say what you want, like he hadn't played in the playoffs, but man, this dude can play some basketball. And they figured out the rotation where he's going to be in there at the end of the game. I think that is a plus. From a negative standpoint, they went right back to where they have been the last 3 or 4 years. When it got crucial and they needed a bucket, what did they do? They stopped moving the ball the way they had been moving the ball all season, and they started going ISO with DeMar DeRozan for him to be able to clear out. The same way that they've gotten beaten in the playoffs is by, in the fourth quarter, going ISO basketball. So it is better, and they will learn from this, but they need to be able to keep their style. Run their bench players, because they have a tremendous advantage over any NBA team. Right now, since February 1st, their bench is averaging 47 points a game. Now, that is an asset. I didn't tally it up last night because of the poor shooting. I thought the poor shooting was more important to talk about. And I believe that bench, as Casey said, there's no book to playing in the playoffs. There's no one said you can't play 10 players in the playoffs. Right. That's what I plan to do. So I believe that there are certain things that you can take from this. And VanVleet playing at the end of the games, he is a name that people should get accustomed to, because he has really improved. In his second year out of Wichita State, last year spent some time in the G League. It's really one of the promising stories, and I believe he will be part of the storyline as we get into the playoffs.
Agree with that.
Go ahead, Jenna.
Look, they don't win this game if LeBron James doesn't have one of the most perfect games of the season. They're missing 5 guys. The coach isn't there. I mean, he needed to step up and carry the team. You got production out of George Hill. You got production out of Kevin Love. But this came down to what he's going to do. And can he do it every single game for every game of the series?
In every playoff series, and this is going back years, coaches will always say, we understand that LeBron will single-handedly win you at least 1 game in the playoffs, at times 2. What can the rest of the players do? But I think LeBron is continuing to show, as often as teams have always game planned against him, of make him a shooter, make him a scorer, don't allow him to facilitate. This season, he's showing that he could do both. He could put up massive numbers with his own production and scoring, also facilitate for teammates. And so to me, it's about his confidence. You could tell he is in a different area of where his headspace is at. And now those guys seem to be feeding in. And I think you can't understate the importance of Kevin Love.
Cece, to build on the point you said, DeMar DeRozan, the second half, he's 1 of 6 from the field. Like, and the one shot he made, by the way, was a bizarre, like, and there's another question with the Raptors. Is Dwayne Casey come to the playoffs? I like Dwayne Casey as a head coach. When you're down 3 with 10 seconds left, and the play you draw up is a contested mid-range 2, that's the one shot DeMar DeRozan made in the second half. That's concerning as well. Go ahead.
That on top of the fact that Dwayne Casey, and I love the idea that he thinks there's no rule book. I can play 10, 11 guys. I can go deep in my That's tough on a coach. It's challenging, because when you get into a playoff situation, more possession basketball, everything counts. Now there's more responsibility on you of who you are putting in the game, and more scrutiny on the type of lineups you're putting forward.
Sarah, where are you heading today?
Toronto.
My
next 2 games are Toronto and Cleveland. So I get to
it's a shame. You really got the drudge of the Eastern Conference. Sarah, as always, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Coming up, we're about to see a new and improved Dez Bryant next season. That's next on First Things First. It has been an intriguing offseason for Dez Dez Bryant when it comes to his future with the Cowboys. Will he take a pay cut? Will he change his game? Will he work on his game? Will he even still be on the Cowboys? So many questions so early in the morning. But it seems that Dez is looking to make improvements as he's planning to work with a personal wide receivers coach next month, focusing on his route running. CC, what does this all mean?
Well, for one, I'm glad that Dez admitted that he needed some type of help. That's the first way to go about it. But I'm just shocked in year number 9. Dez is going to be 30 this year. Like, this is the first time that he started working with a wide receiver coach. Like, what has he been doing up to this point? Like, all the elite wide receivers are working with someone. So for me, that also is an answer of why I thought Dez Bryant was going to be a superstar. Like, I really thought 3 or 4 years ago that was just the beginning of the arc that he was going to be on, that was going to have him be one of the most dominant receivers in the NFL for 8 years, at least 6 to 8 years. We didn't see that. So when you talk about you're starting to hire, or you're going to be working with a wide receiver coach or a guru, I'm wondering, what was your off-season training before? So for me, so much about being a good football player is how do I improve every off-season? And I haven't seen that in Dez Bryant. So that's called up to him. So now at a later stage of his career, he's going to decide to start working on his routes. So his athletic ability, it's gone down a little bit. His speed's gone down a little bit. And now he's starting to work on it. To me, that is, he is not handling his talent the way it should have. He should have been working with someone on his route running when he was at the peak of his career 3 or 4 years ago. That's what the greatest players do.
What was your off seasons like? What were your off seasons like? Once you were the Cris Carter we know now, with the Vikings, once you made 3, 4 Pro Bowls, what were the off seasons like?
I took 4 weeks off from training. All right, and that was either from the Pro Bowl, which is typically the last week. It's the week after the Super Bowl, so it's about the second week in February. I take 4 weeks off. Then I start doing non-weight-bearing exercises. I work out hard for 4 weeks, and then I start back my interval training and my weightlifting once we start April 1st. Once I get to May, I start working on my route running and my ability to catch the football. I do it in segments. Actually, my trainer is who Antonio Brown has hired as his trainer a while ago. Larry Fitzgerald, his personal trainer, Bill Welly, he's the guy that worked for me and trained me when I was training at the peak of my career. So guys who are still involved with the top receivers, those were the guys who trained me, and we worked on every aspect. But we used to make a list of things that I didn't do well. If it was a route, if it was an exercise, if it was a muscle group. And we put those things at the top of the list. For that offseason, those were the things that we would concentrate on. Myself and Brian Billick, myself and Chip Myers and other wide receiver coaches, Tom Moore, what I would do every year is give them, going into training camp, the routes the previous year that I was not good at and the routes that I had worked on that offseason and how I wanted to implement them into the offense and show the coaches that I was better at those routes and I wanted them to develop more confidence in me running those routes.
All right, I wanted to ask you about someone else because I do want to remind the audience who Dez Bryant was at one point in his career, and it wasn't a very short period. For 3 years. His years 3, 4, 5. Here were his averages: 91 catches, 1,300 yards, 14 touchdowns. That's dominant. That is fully dominant. So but he has not been that guy since then. Since then, he's averaged 50 catches, 670 yards, and less than 6 touchdowns. A guy that's maintained it, Larry Fitzgerald. He's doing what we're hearing about Dez doing now this offseason. Those are the types of things those guys do.
Larry Fitzgerald has at least 4 to 6 wide receivers, former wide receivers, and a couple coaches. Myself, Michael Irvin, Jerry Rice, other wide receivers, and a couple coaches. They come in a 2-month period that he calls, that's his personal training camp in Minnesota. He does that from June until the second week of July before he goes to training camp.
But with regards to Dez, what I'm hearing from you is a little bit of maybe too little too late from him, just as far as this late into your career, first starting to hone those skills that'll make you a better route runner?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm just surprised that it's taken this long. Like, at what point did he look at and didn't think that he didn't need to get better? I believe there's still a chance for him because at 30, you're still young enough to be able to make improvements. But if I was working with Dez, what I would do is work on 2 aspects, and those are 2 aspects I believe are the most important. They would be his releases off the line. I would be able to get him cleaner releases and at the top of the route because he's not real fast, but he is physical. How do I create more separation at the top? So if I was working with Dez, I'd work with the start and the finish of the route. I believe that would make him a lot better. I wouldn't think about the slot. I wouldn't think about adding other routes. Those two things right now I would have him concentrate on because those are two things that would be able to help him out.
Right now, Dez Bryant is at home going cleaner releases, start and finish.
If it came from Chris Carter, he ain't gonna listen to it.
Okay, coming up, he should. Is this the best LeBron has ever played? That's next on First Things First. Debatable. I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.